They buried a man with flowers, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. 56,000 years ago, somewhere in the mountains of northern Iraq, a group of humans dug a grave, laid a body inside it, and covered it with pollen from at least 8 different flowering plants. Nobody told them to. There was no religion yet, no priest, no tradition passed down through generations of civilization. They just did it. And that one act, that single moment of inexplicable tenderness in the middle of the Ice Age, raises a question that nobody has ever fully answered. Why? We have a comfortable story we tell ourselves about ancient humans, that they were brutal, survivalist, that death was just another obstacle, another body to step over on the way to finding food, that grief was a luxury they couldn't afford. But the dirt doesn't lie. And what archaeologists have been pulling out of the ground for the last century tells a completely different story. A story about people who felt loss so deeply, so profoundly, that they developed rituals around death tens of thousands of years before they developed agriculture, writing, or cities. The question is not whether ancient humans grieved. The question is what that grief looked like, and what it means that we've almost completely forgotten how to do it the way they did. In 1908, 2 amateur archaeologists named Amédée and Jean Buissoni discovered something extraordinary in a cave in southwestern France, La Chapelle aux Saints. Inside, they found a deliberate burial. A Neanderthal man, approximately 40 years old, placed carefully in a pit. His body was positioned, protected. The bones of animals surrounded him. This was 70,000 years ago. Not modern humans, Neanderthals, a species we spent centuries dismissing as primitive, brutish, incapable of complex thought. But here was the evidence, carved into the floor of a French cave, that something we consider uniquely human, the ritual honoring of the dead, existed long before we did. And this is the part almost nobody talks about. That Neanderthal man was approximately 40 years old. In a world where most people died in their 20s, 40 was ancient. His skeleton showed severe arthritis, damaged vertebrae, a healed leg injury. He had been sick and dependent for years before he died. Someone took care of him. Someone fed him. Someone kept him alive long past the point where pure survival logic would have abandoned him. And when he finally died, someone buried him. Not because a book told them to, not because society demanded it, because they felt something when he was gone. But the flowers in Iraq are something else entirely. Shanidar Cave, 1960. Archaeologist Ralph Solecki is excavating a burial site when his Kurdish workers discover something unusual in the soil samples. Pollen. Enormous concentrations of pollen from 8 different plant species: grape hyacinth, bachelor's button, groundsel, ephedra. Not random, not scattered by wind, clustered, deliberate, placed by human hands around a body that had been dead for 56,000 years. The man they called Shanidar IV was surrounded by flowers in his grave. Think about what that means for a moment. Someone 56,000 years ago walked into a field, picked flowers, carried them back, arranged them around a body. Not for any practical reason, not for survival, not for food or shelter or protection, just because someone they loved was gone and they wanted that person to have something beautiful. This is where everything changes, because once you accept that ancient humans grieved this deeply, once you accept the flowers and the careful burials and the positioning of bodies to face the rising sun, a much darker question emerges. How did they survive it? We struggle with grief today with therapists and medication and support groups and an entire infrastructure built around helping people process loss. We still get destroyed by it. We still fall apart. We still sometimes never recover. They had none of that. What they had instead was something we have almost completely dismantled. They had each other. Anthropologist Barbara J. King spent years studying grief in animals and early humans. What she found was that grief in hunter-gatherer communities was never a private experience. It was communal, loud, physical, and shared by everyone. When someone died in a hunter-gatherer camp, the entire group stopped. Not for an afternoon, not for a polite funeral service that lasts an hour before everyone goes back to their normal lives. For days, sometimes weeks, the body was not hidden, not rushed away, not processed by strangers in a building nobody visits. The community sat with it, touched it, talked to it, wailed over it. The grief was expressed so physically and so collectively that researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer tribes describe it as something almost overwhelming to witness. And then something specific happened. Stories. Around the fire at night, after someone died, the group would talk about them. Wiesner's research with the Jew hoansi people of southern Africa found that approximately 80% of nighttime conversation around the fire was devoted to stories about other people, their qualities, their failures, their funny moments, their courage. When someone died, those stories didn't stop. They intensified. The dead person's name was spoken constantly. Their stories were told and retold. Their personality was kept alive in the mouths of every person who knew them, not as a formal memorial, not as a structured eulogy, just as conversation, natural, constant, woven into the fabric of every evening for as long as the people who loved them were still alive. This is the part that stops me completely. We have a word for what happens when everyone who remembers you is gone: oblivion. And ancient humans, without philosophy degrees or existential frameworks, understood this instinctively. They fought it the only way they knew how. They kept talking. Today, we do the opposite. We are taught not to speak the names of the dead too often, not to make others uncomfortable, to process grief privately, quietly, efficiently, to move on, to heal, to return to productivity as quickly as possible. We built an entire civilization on forward momentum, on leaving things behind, on the radical idea that progress means never looking back. And somewhere in that process, we forgot how to sit with loss. We forgot that grief was never meant to be a private room you lock yourself inside. It was meant to be a fire you sit around together, a story you tell out loud, a name you refuse to stop saying. We conquered death with medicine and hygiene and safety. And we still don't know what to do when someone we love disappears from the world because we stopped doing the one thing that actually helped. We stopped talking about them. There is a grave somewhere in the mountains of Iraq, 56,000 years old. And in that grave, long dissolved into the ancient soil, are the ghosts of 8 different flowers that someone chose to pick on the day someone they loved stopped breathing. We don't know who picked them. We don't know who was buried. We don't know what words were spoken over that grave in a language that no longer exists. But we know someone was there. Someone stayed. Someone chose beauty over nothing. Maybe grief was never about letting go. Maybe it was always about refusing to. If this made you think of someone, say their name tonight. Even just once. And if you want more questions nobody thought to ask, you know where to find them. Hit subscribe. We're just getting started.